Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Denver Dzogchen podcast. I'm here once again with my friend Joe Wagner. And today we have a special beginning for you. We are going to start a little series that I think will be beneficial for Dharma practitioners of all types, or even people who are thinking about Dharma or are curious about Dharma. We're going to go through what are called the four mind turnings, or the four thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma. These are the most essential thing on starting the path. And to me, they're like a golden key. The more time you spend on them, the more progress you'll make, the more willpower you'll have, the more success you'll have in all your endeavors in Buddha Dharma. And by working with these and studying these, I think it'll really inspire you, help you to practice more if that's your goal, or at least have more intuitiveness. So I'll let Joe go ahead and introduce the four mind turnings, and kind of you can just tell us what they are and the role they play in our path.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you, Damien. Happy to be here. When you first start into the Vajrayana path, and one of the things that makes it special is it really is a path. It's unlike, say, Zen. I was involved in Zen for a long time. I still absolutely love Zen, but Zen is pretty much the same beginning, middle, and end. It's meditation, a little bit of chanting, and that's where you're at. In the Rinzai system, they have, various koans, but they're all more or less the same process. In Vajrayana, you really have an opportunity to turn your mind in a direction that it doesn't go in naturally. Now, normally, we're interested in our own well-being, that of the people around us. We like getting ahead of our enemies or destroying our enemies, depending on who we are, and helping the people we like. That's sort of natural stuff. When you start on the Vajrayana path, there's a series of practices called the Ngondro, the preliminaries, that they go from the very beginning, really thinking about what am I doing in this physical body? What is my life about? To the very end of the path of unifying your mind with the mind of the Lama. And it's a gradual process, and it starts with their outer and inner preliminaries. And the outer preliminaries are what we're talking about here. Those are also called the four mind changings, or I've heard them called the four mind turnings, or the four thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma. I don't remember who it is, but somebody calls them the four mind benders, which they are a little bit, because it's stuff we don't normally think about. So it's good to reflect on these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that, after practicing Tibetan Buddhism for a while, I was like, where's Shakyamuni in all of this? Because in some ways you can kind of like, where's the four noble truths and the eightfold path? Like they almost don't talk about it. But then I really realized that these four mind turnings really link up to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold.
Yeah, well said. That's absolutely right. And yeah, it is easy to, with all the deities of Tara and Guru Padmasambhava and all these various, yidams and all this business, these protectors, monsters, all sorts of things, it's easy to lose track of the foundational parts of Buddhism. But the foundational parts are the same for everyone. And they start, the way that they're approached in Vajrayana is reflecting on four situations, four truths that exist for all human beings, but are not usually looked at closely. But when you do look at them closely, they do have the effect of causing you to realize that the normal path that we're on of moving just forward in our lives and having, making a family and raising kids and trying to get money together is not all there is to being a human being. And whether that's your situation, it doesn't preclude lay life, not even slightly, but it does turn your mind in a different direction than it is based on what the kind of education, if you want to call it that we get, not only in school, but in this commercial environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And the four thoughts can be kind of uncomfortable, especially the latter three, with this emphasis on suffering. The all-pervasive suffering of existence is something a lot of people have a hard time with Buddhism, right? Like, well, but I kind of like life sometimes. And, and so a nice thing about the four thoughts is we start off with this one, the precious human birth, which really is a lot about gratitude and recognition of a positive circumstance that we're in. So maybe kick us off with that first of the four mind changes.
Yeah, I thought I'll list off the four so that people know what they are. Well, and then we can talk about precious human body, and maybe in the next one we can cover another one or two. We'll just see how much time we've got. So, the precious human body is a series of reflections in which you recognize how incredibly fortunate we actually are. There are so many types of beings. In the Buddhist world, there are even more than what we normally come in contact with. But even in my yard, which is just a suburban yard here in Denver, this morning we had a cat, which was seeming to be hungry. We have a bunch of birds. I've got a semi-friendly raccoon, which scares the crap out of me from time to time. There's like quite a few types of animals, tons of insects and other kinds of things. And from the Buddhist perspective, the heap of that pile of beings that are even visible to the average person is the human. This seems obvious to us, but we don't often think that about the kind of freedom that we have as humans, what we can really do. Oftentimes we find ourselves sort of in a blinder wearing mode where all I can do is go to work and all I can do is continue to save money or go on this vacation I don't want to go on, whatever it happens to be. But from the Buddhist perspective, this body, this physical embodiment is incredibly useful. We have a great degree of autonomy and will, and we can actually think about the situation we find ourselves in and direct our actions based on our reflections, something that your average animal cannot do. They cannot think really about the future. They might have a sense of, hey, last time I stepped in a trap like that was bad news, so I won't do it this time. But they can't think about the greater picture, which we have as humans, and that's pretty special.
Yeah, that capacity for self-reflection and consideration of what we're doing and what we can do, and a sense of options, yeah, is really like precluded in even many human births, right? And so there's also a distinction between a precious human birth and just a human birth, right?
That's really true. Yeah, that's really true. I did say I was going to cover the four thoughts, just say what they are so people have a general sense. The first is the precious human body, which is the most positive of them, because someone reading this or listening to this or coming across these teachings almost by definition has this precious birth. And there is a difference between an ordinary human birth where you don't have what are called the freedoms and riches, which we'll cover later, and a precious human birth in which you have all of your faculties and you have this opportunity to turn your life into something of a spiritual journey, which some people in the world, many people unfortunately do not have, but everybody listening to this does have. And so congratulations to you for that. But so the first is the precious human birth. The second is reflections about how everything is impermanent and we're all going to die and everybody's going to die. And then we talk about cause and effect, which in Buddhism is called karma and is, of course, more complicated than cause and effect, but is, that's an easy way for us to get a handle on it by thinking about cause and effect in our actions, in our thoughts and so forth. And then the last of the four, which is nobody's favorite to think about, it seems, which they call the defects of samsara. But I think of it as the crappiness of samsara, because those defects are all pervasive and can really be shocking to look straight at. So over the next couple of podcasts, we'll cover all these. But this time we're going to talk about the precious human birth, because that's a nice way to get started.
Totally. And yeah, so all of these truths, they point to things like, as you said, that they're just true about life. Anybody can look at life, and you don't have to be Buddhist to know that these things you can see and anybody can observe that they are just facts of our existence. But somehow we manage to ignore most of them most of the time. It's pretty amazing, our ability for self-deception around these things. So the precious human birth is a lot of like what I do with my time really matters. Like I have an opportunity and I have resources, and I can waste it or I can use it.
Yeah. I think that it's easy, I should say, to be a little bit hard on people for not taking their precious human birth more seriously or whatever. But if we really look at it, there are many different types of people. And most people are so balked about by troubles that they do not really have even the opportunity to think about these things in a real way. They may hear, they happen upon a friend who happens to be a Buddhist. They're like, yeah, we got this precious human birth. It just in one ear and out the other, so to speak. I mean, what did Thoreau say? He said that was in, 1840s. He said the majority of people live lives of quiet desperation. And this is really true. So in order to really embrace the path, we have to separate from the herd, and we have to use our critical faculties to reflect upon what we've really got and whether there is an opportunity here for us or not. More than just getting along, just making it through to being 75, or I guess 76 is the average departure age these days. So it takes a special kind of person even to be able to think about things clearly enough to recognize that they have an actual opportunity. And I do. I'm going to give a shout out to old Thoreau. If you haven't read any of Walden in a while, many of us read that in school. Even just the first chapter, Economy, and the introduction they're so Buddhist in his perspective on life, in his perspective on causing you to change your view of the situation you're in from one of I have no choices to I really do have choices. And that is what the reflection on the precious human birth is about. It's what the outer Ngondro, these 4 mind changings, is about. It's what the inner Ngondro is about. And it's what the path is about, is recognizing the opportunity. And the way that they frame the preciousness of the human birth is something in the context of the 8 freedoms and the 10 riches. And there are 8 freedoms, which we'll go over in a second, and then 10 riches, 5 of which come from others and 5 of which come from oneself. So I'll list those. They're not that important to memorize, but interesting to reflect on a little bit. So when we think about the freedoms, we got 8 of them, and these are we're free from being in the 3 lower realms: the hell realms, the realms of the hungry ghosts, and animal rebirths. To understand this, really, we have to recognize that Buddhists believe in rebirth, and that all of the 6 types of beings, from the gods down to beings in hell, are all potential births for us to awaken in. And they depend on our actions, on karma, right? But for us, we lucked out and we found this human birth, which they say is as rare as a turtle which swims in the ocean and only comes to the surface once every 100 years to put his head through a floating piece of wood with a hole in it. As rare as that. When one floating piece of wood, one turtle, once every 100 years, he just happens to yoke himself on that piece of wood. So if you think about the kind of vastness that we're talking about, it's the first step toward recognizing, like, hey, maybe I want to think a little bit more about what to do with this life rather than just do what all my friends are doing or what I see on television or these days on the internet, and really try to make a little bit more of this birth than I would have had I not come across this teaching. So hopefully everybody who receives this teaching today, hardly a teaching, this information, will take a moment to reflect on the fact that they can make their own decisions. Whether you find yourself in a situation of very little freedom, like one fellow I work with who's in prison, or with a great deal of freedom where you don't have to work and you have lots of money or whatever. All of us have this opportunity to reframe our lives as something truly precious and to make use of that. So that's what this is really about. It's not about being depressed about things we don't have. So anyway, I just throw that out. But let me knock these out real quick. The first 3 are being free from those lower realm rebirths, and then also to be free from being a god, which is higher than us in terms of enjoyments, but not as free in terms of thinking critically about things. To have a true precious human birth, you have to be free from some kinds of wrong views. And the main wrong view that people in our time need to be free of is the view that at death you just disappear. This might take more than we might not be able to cover the whole thing today because I have so many little things to say, but I throw this out because I come across a lot of people who have got this idea that when you're dead, and that's it. And this may be true. I cannot say from my personal experience that this is definitely not true. I have had certain experiences that lead me to believe that consciousness is not dependent upon the body, but that doesn't make it 100%. I'm not an absolute expert on this. I can't say with absolute authority. But if we look at the people throughout the history of both Eastern and Western culture, which is about 3,000 years, we have fairly, some kind of record of, there hasn't been, as far as I can tell, a single extremely well thought of person, the kind of people who we would think might know about this, who said, oh yeah, don't need to worry because whatever happens, as soon as you're dead, you're gone. Nobody has said that, whether we look at the religious figures who have influenced, humankind more than anyone else, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad or Moses or the Buddha himself, they all said, you need to be careful now because at the time of your death, things will, not cease. We have a few modern philosophers. I'm not 100% sure about Nietzsche's view, but it did look like he wasn't saying that we for sure continued. And people like Sartre and stuff, they probably, they might have a bone to pick with me on this. But if you look at most people, whether it's famous physicists like Bohm or Einstein, or we talk about humanitarians and philosophers like Socrates and Plato, nobody said that when you're dead, that's it, so you don't have to worry. And so if we look at what's called Pascal's wager, if the nihilists, that's the category of people who think that when you're dead, you're finished, if they're correct, and that's a natural growth, I have to say, out of the scientific materialism type of education, which is what is modern education, whether you're here or in Asia, whatever. This kind of materialistic outlook tends toward this kind of nihilism. If nihilism is true, we're good. It doesn't matter. Pascal said that, hey, if you cease at death, then all of our, the rather minimal efforts that we make during this life to ensure that our next chapter after death is good. If there is no next chapter, then it won't matter. And there's not much time spent anyway, so we're good. But if it does matter, we're going to very much wish that we had spent that time. And that is the perspective of the open-minded Buddhist of today. Maybe we don't have enough direct experience or enough deep meditation to be able to actually know our past lives or know about the process of reincarnation. But if we just use our basic intelligence, it's worth a little bit of reflection and a little bit of thinking like, if we do continue, it might as well be smart now to set that up to be as wise as possible. Same thing if you have a big court case coming up, it's good to hire the best lawyer you have and to be as prepared as possible, right? Maybe it'll get canceled or thrown out or there'll be no issue. But if it doesn't, you want to be prepared. It's the same kind of mentality there. Does that make sense?
Totally. And one thing I wanted to mention is that I think that the fact that reincarnation is true is also hidden in the code. So all it takes is a little looking around to see that everything is recycled. Energy, the seasons, everything is going in and out, in and out. Every night we go into a dream where we don't even remember this life. We have a bunch of experiences, and then we come back into this body in the morning, and then resume this life. To me, and you can look at like child prodigies, and you can look at like some of the research that's been done among children and their past life recall, and they've met several cases where they will clearly explain details of a past life that they then
Hundreds of
discovered.
thousands of cases, well documented. You're right.
Yeah. So I think that we don't have to rely just on the scripture or Pascal's wager to know that reincarnation is true. I think we can also see it in animals, the incredible love that some animals have, or capacity to like do things that you wouldn't think when you see like those cute Facebook videos of like a lion and a, deer laying down together and being friends, things that shouldn't happen in nature, but do, these exceptions. To me, there's a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that reincarnation is true.
Of course, I agree. And if you read any of the books about this, whether it's Raymond Moody or any of the other famous authors, there has been quite a bit of scientific study. It leans toward reincarnation being true, but it is important for people who hear this podcast to know it does not require that you believe in it. It doesn't matter whether you believe or not. It's wise to think about your precious human birth, even if you think that for sure you will die and be gone, whenever that happens, there'll be no more of you. That we can't say for sure. There is a lot of evidence, and there's the evidence of so many people who we would think, who's going to know? If anyone knows, well, wouldn't it be someone like the Dalai Lama? Maybe. Wouldn't it be someone like Jesus? Or maybe Muhammad, if you're in that category. They all say more or less the same thing, is the base truth being you do not cease at death. It's worth reflecting on this, no matter how sure of your position you are. It's okay. It's okay to be totally sure. Buddhism has benefits in this life too. So it's not like we must believe in reincarnation, although I suppose it should be said that reflecting on this is very important. And if you really are anti any kind of continuation, that's worth really exploring, like where your resistance is, just as a person, because it makes your life more rich to think of it as not so limited, I think. But
one more thing I wanted to say was that that even in the context of this life, like modern neuroscience is come to the place where we're really starting to understand how short-term gratification causes a lot of suffering, and long-term gratification causes more happiness in this life. So, because there can be this tendency towards like hedonism, right? That's one of the dangers of a nihilistic point of view, is carelessness and hedonism. Well, the truth is that even if this life is all there is, those two points of view lead to dopamine depletion and a lack of enjoyment of this life. They've found that the happiest people set long-term goals and work towards them every day without seeing reward and satisfaction or feedback until longer periods of time. Things that quickly produce enjoyment and give you pleasure quickly tend to dump your neurochemicals that give you pleasure and happiness and leave you depressed, because we need to learn to like slow drip those. And so even in the context of just one lifetime, even if this is all there is, there's a ton of benefit, not to mention that altruistic and morally positive actions also lead to more happiness. So all of this together doesn't even require a longer view. You can just look at this life, that being kind, compassionate, and careful and working towards long-term goals of self-development, self-growth, and kindness will lead to a better life, even if this is the only one you get.
Sure. But this is a specific talking mostly to people who are already in the camp of rebirth of some sort. So yeah, of course you're absolutely right. But we're not here to convince anyone of anything. There's no, the way to be convinced, if you want to use that word, is to look within. Not to try to base it on scientific studies or something you read. There's a certain calling that is available to everyone, and coming to look deeply about life, whether it's true that you're reborn as an animal sometimes or whatever or not, is kind of a side issue after a while, which I think the four mind changings help you to come to see. And so, yeah. Anyway, I totally understand what you're saying, and I support that, of course. But for those of you who are on the fence about this, we're not asking you to believe anything. I think that's important to know. But we might as well continue on with the freedoms, right? So we can't have these wrong views, which put us on this little discussion about rebirth. It says in the text that you can't be born a savage. In this case, it's someone who is not exposed to these teachings, who does not have any opportunity to hear about other belief systems. So we are not in that category. And the next one is to be born a mute. Now, these days, the technological help that's out there maybe can make it that that's not as big an obstacle as it once was. So, of course, handicapped people can still practice the path. It's not that. I think in early days, if you were mute, there was no real way to express yourself if written language was not open to you. So that's what they mean by that. And then if you were born, the last of these 8 freedoms is to be born in an age when there's no Buddha, when that means there's no existing teachings of Dharma. If those don't exist, then there's no way to get on the path. But we live in that age now. The teachings of the Buddha are still around and easy to come in contact with. And whether or not the world situation is very strong or not, in terms of Dharma, it's still no issue to be a Buddhist. The teachings are available. So that's another of the freedoms. Do those make sense? Do we need to go over those anymore?
Yep, I think it's pretty clear.
Great. Then we'll just whip through the riches. There are riches that come from oneself, and there are riches that come from others. The 5 riches that come from oneself is to be born a human. We have the widest opportunity as humans. To be centrally born, which means to be born in a country where Buddhism is possible, right? Which is anywhere on the earth right now. To have intact sense powers, meaning that you're not unable to think straight or something like that. You need to have your faculties intact. To have an unperverted livelihood is the next one. And what that means is you are not in a line of work which is inherently anti-good, like a professional assassin would probably have trouble practicing the Dharma. These days, it's probably worth reflecting on this for a second.
Exterminators, like insect exterminator.
Yeah, that's also a very negative thing. Where something where you're killing, direct killing is for sure to be avoided. So if you're interested in a religious life of any kind, even a spiritual life, apply for jobs other than being an exterminator or being the one who pulls the lever at a in a prison, or being an assassin. These things are inherently bad. Now, unfortunately, and I think it's worth just stating this, all ways of gaining money are a little bit corrupted. It doesn't matter what you do. Let's say you have like the best possible job, a job that the Buddha himself would be like, that's right livelihood, part of the Eightfold Path, right? Which would be like being a surgeon, being a doctor, being a nurse, any of these kind of jobs where it's really like being a hospice nurse, something where you're really bringing comfort to people. Even these jobs produce tremendous waste. They have a lot of mixed things. So whatever your job is, you can do this. I want to make sure that everyone knows that no matter where you are on that spectrum, you can still practice the path. But it's going to be more effective and easier if you don't build bombs for a living. If you don't, work as a firing squad instructor or something like that, it's probably going to be harder. And that's what they mean by unperverted livelihood. In the time of the Buddha, being a butcher or, working in a slaughterhouse would almost exclude you from the path. I think things are so mixed now that I would not be able to point my finger and say, this is definitely no way you can get ahead this way. Whatever we're doing, we should try to do it as lightly as we can with the least amount of causing suffering as possible. But we're all, in the middle of it. Everyone's connected. So
I have one
Go
mama
ahead.
had a student who worked in a meat packing place, and they're like, I should probably quit, right? And the Lama actually said, no, it's actually really good you're there. You need to start praying for all of the beings that come through that place. And there's probably nobody else to do that. So that's another point of view that I think the tantric point of view can start to open up for some of us, that we
Agree.
don't have to look at things as so
Agree. And
black and white.
that would probably even if you were the one killing the animals, you could probably still have this. But advice from in general, try not to do killing. Killing of any sort is very negative and has heavy karmic effects that we should attempt to avoid. And that goes for killing even insects in your house. Try to put them outside. They want to live. That's just, I throw it out there. But yeah, of course it's a wide spectrum, and some jobs are much more negative than others, and we should aim to have the least negative impact as we can. Jobs like Damien's job, being a teacher. This is as good as it gets. So thank you, Damien. And please keep up such good work. And those of you who are doing really tough jobs, reconsider. reconsider. That's easier to change jobs maybe than to embrace working as a slaughterhouse manager in a positive way. I don't know, but just so it's said.
Yeah.
And then it says, as one of the 5 riches from oneself, is to have faith in the right place, which means in the Dharma, according to this traditional list, but being open to spiritual opportunities is what it really means. Not necessarily being like the Buddha's right and everyone else is wrong. That's certainly not a healthy way to look at things. The 5 riches from others are that a Buddha appeared in the world, that he taught the Dharma, and that the teachings are alive, and that there are followers who we can connect with, since the Buddha himself was a long time ago, and that they're not only followers, but they're actually teachers who can help us understand how to proceed on the path. Those are the 5 riches that come from others. So this is a general overview of what makes a precious human body, what makes a precious human birth. And everyone, I personally think in this world, everybody has the precious human birth. You know, it's not going to exclude anyone except someone who has no opportunity to hear about a spiritual way of life. I don't think you have to absolutely have to be a Buddhist to make progress in a spiritual way. Not at all. You know, I've met quite a few Buddhists who I'm not very impressed by, and I've met a lot of Christians and Muslims who I think are great bodhisattvas, and even people who are, say, they're flat out atheists, who I think are actually better people than myself. So it's not as clear cut as this, but knowing about these things is good, and it helps us to mostly to appreciate what we've got. We've got a body. Our body is more or less under our control. Our mind is more or less clear, and we can, you know, depending on where you're born in the world, you can direct your life in a direction that you want. That's incredibly powerful, and that's what it means to have the precious human birth. It means we can do something more than just be an animal in a human body. An animal, what do they want to do? They want to reproduce and they want to eat. That's all. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we have so much more potential as humans. So what this is about is reflecting on our potential, reflecting on our decision making, and aiming toward the highest possible outcome.
Could you say a little more about how do we actually practice this? How do we reflect on these and so that they become part of us?
I think it's very good to practice gratitude. An attitude of gratitude is the most beneficial thing you can do. It isn't an end point. Some people think like, as long as I'm grateful, I'm all right. It's not necessarily that easy, but it does allow you to recognize the incredible freedom you have. Being grateful is an opportunity to recognize what you can do with this precious human birth. You know, of course, as Buddhists, the main thing you can do is you can practice the Dharma, right? You can attempt to end your participation in samsara to some degree and benefit others as well as you can. But for all of us, it's an opportunity, by reflecting on the incredible fortune we have to be born with 2 hands, with 2 legs, being able to do whatever, more or less whatever we want. And for those of us born in the West, I mean, I'm not sure we can say this entirely about people born in China or in North Korea, where the rules are such that you might not have the kind of freedoms we have. But most of the world, you can do whatever you want. So the question becomes, what am I going to do? And the way to reflect on it is realize how incredibly fortunate we are, and at that point, to recognize that our world is a series of T-junctures, or high road, low road kind of opportunities. And the more we're able to, as you were saying before, in the context of dopamine release, the more we're able to postpone our gratification, the more opportunity we have to help others. And the more we help others, the more we enjoy that, and the better our lives go, in a general sense. Because and as we'll get to a little later, the fact is we are going to die. We do not know when. So we need to make the most use of today as we can. In our group, we talk very frequently that your life really starts when you wake up in the morning. Before that, most people don't have any control over their dreams, and in deep sleep, they're completely unconscious. So, your morning, your day starts when you are born into today, and you're born into this body and so forth, just as you were born, as we talked about last time, as you were born into your baby body when you were born from your mother's womb. Your day starts then, and it ends effectively for most non-heavy duty yogis when you fall asleep at night. You lose control, unless you're a great dreaming expert or you have real meditative power to be able to be conscious in the deep sleep state. Your life is only this long. By reflecting, I have this precious human birth, especially first thing in the morning, then you can bring your intentionality into today and rise above the kind of animal-like unconsciousness that we often find ourselves in. It's I think for many people, the period between when they wake up and when they get their second or even third cup of coffee in them is a period of fog, and they're not even conscious. They're just like only semi-conscious. They're living entirely by rote. We're living by habit, entirely by habit. We're wasting this precious life. So by reflecting on this, it causes us to be more awake. And Buddhism is all about becoming a Buddha. And what is a Buddha? Someone who is awake. So we are not Buddhas yet, but we have an opportunity to up our awakeness. And that's what all these reflections are about, becoming more and more conscious of our outer actions in the world and our inner thoughts and directing ourselves toward the best possible good for ourselves and others. That's what it's really about, I think.
Yeah. And having this kind of gratitude and positivity towards our life also opens up, like, if any of us are practitioners of like pure vision, right? When we start to see, like Garchen Rinpoche at one time, it's so easy to be cynical about our country, but he's like, this place is amazing. You can practice the Buddha Dharma with no restrictions, completely as freely as you want. Coming from a prison in China not long ago, it's like, yes, we have amazing situation, and really in a lot of ways it is like a pure land. We have everything we need to eat. We have all of the Dharma teachings will come by Amazon in one day or instantly onto our phones. I mean, the number of things we could be grateful for are really astounding, and if we stop to think about them, then we can really start to see this life as more pure and beautiful than we did before.
That's exactly right. And then it opens up all kinds of possibilities for us to become as free as possible, as available to assist ourselves and others as we can be. And that's what this is really about.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think this is a good place to stop. It's been great covering this, and in our next episode, we'll talk about impermanence, which is a little more difficult topic, but I think it leads to some of similar conclusions. We'll just see how precious things are as we talk about that. Thanks again for joining us. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, all those things, and share this on your social media. It really helps for a small podcast like ours to get shared in the community. So thank you for listening and watching, and we will see you again next time.
Absolutely.